There is a scorch mark on the history of nearly every civilization on Earth, and it is always shaped the same way. A serpent the size of a hillside, wings like the sails of a drowned ship, a throat that glows before it opens. From the frozen fjords of the north to the river valleys of ancient China, people who never met, who spoke no common word, who were separated by oceans and centuries, all looked into the dark and drew the very same monster. And here's the thing that should keep you turning this over long after the fire has died down. What if they were not inventing it? What if they were remembering it? What if, somewhere between the myth and the fossil, there is a door that was quietly closed, and behind that door, something enormous is still breathing? Tonight we are going to open a few of those doors, one by one. 12 creatures the world swears it made up, and we are going to ask a very simple, very heavy question. What would the real world actually look like if they had never left it? How would they hunt? Where would they sleep? Which parts of the map would we simply hand over to them? So before we step through the first door, I want you to tell me, what hour has it found you? Is it late where you are? And where are you listening from? Now, let us begin where every human fear seems to begin. Let us begin with the dragon. Long before anyone wrote the word down, the shape already existed. That is the first strange fact, and it is worth sitting with. The dragon is not the property of any one people. It is not a European invention, nor an Asian one, nor African. Though every one of those places carried it, it appears to be something closer to a universal human reflex, as if the species itself, wherever it settled, eventually looked up at a certain kind of darkness and decided that something with scales and hunger lived inside it. In the oldest layers we can still read, in the sun-baked clay of Mesopotamia, there was Tiamat. She was the sea before there was land, a vast coiling body of salt and chaos, and when the younger gods finally killed her, they did not simply defeat her, they split her open and built the sky from one half of her and the earth from the other. Consider what that means. The people of the Tigris and the Euphrates did not think of the dragon as a beast that lived in the world. They thought the world was built out of the dragon's corpse, the rivers, the horizon, the ground under their sandals. All of it was the leftover body of a great serpent that came before everything. That is not the fear of an animal. That is the fear of something older than order itself. Travel east, across the mountains and the deserts and the long roads that would one day carry silk, and the creature changes its temper entirely. In China, the dragon, the long, did not crouch in caves waiting to eat the unwary. It swam through the sky like a fish through water. It was the pulse behind the rain, the muscle inside the river, the reason the crops rose or failed. Emperors did not slay it. They claimed to be descended from it. To sit on the throne was to sit on the back of the dragon, and the robes and the banners and the carved thrones all curled with its long whiskered body. Here the great serpent was not the enemy of civilization, it was the beating heart of it, a thing of water and weather and luck, benevolent when respected, catastrophic when insulted. Then come west again, into the cold forests and the long winters of northern Europe, and the dragon hardens into something meaner and lonelier. Here it is a hoarder. It sleeps on gold in the belly of a mountain, and it burns everything that comes near. The Norse told of the serpent that circled the whole world under the sea, so vast that it held its own tail in its mouth, and they believed that on the last day it would let go, and the loosening of that grip would end the world. The Anglo-Saxons sang of a worm woken by a single stolen cup, a creature that flew out at night and set whole halls alight for the insult. In this version, the dragon is not the sky and it is not the sea. It is greed given a body and heat given a will, and it wants only to be left alone on its pile of cold metal in the dark. Different faces, the same animal underneath, and the question that has followed the dragon through all of it, the question medieval mapmakers scrawled at the edges of the known world, where the coastline ran out, "Here be dragons," is the question we are going to take seriously tonight. Not did people believe in it. They clearly did, deeply, for thousands of years. The question is stranger and quieter than that. If you took the dragon out of the myth and set it down in the real world, a living animal of blood and bone and breath, with a metabolism and a hunting ground and a place in the food chain, could it work? And if it could, what would it do to us? Start with the body, because the body is where the trouble begins. A dragon, as the stories describe it, the size of a barn, sometimes the size of a village, should not be able to leave the ground. The square cube law is a patient and merciless thing. As you scale a creature up, its weight grows far faster than the strength of the bones and muscles meant to carry it. The largest flying animals that ever truly lived, the great pterosaurs of the age of reptiles, pushed the very edge of what was possible, and even they were mostly hollow bone and stretched membrane, feather-light despite their size, closer to a kite than a beast. A dragon built like the ones in the paintings, thick and armored and heavy with muscle, would sink into the earth, not rise off it. So if we want a real dragon, we have to build it the way nature would have been forced to, and nature, it turns out, has already left us the blueprints. Picture the bones first, not solid, never solid, hollow, threaded through with air, the way a bird's bones are. A lattice of thin struts holding vast empty spaces. This alone would strip away most of the weight the myths assume. Now go further. The old legends insist the dragon breathes fire and belches smoke, and the analytical mind rolls its eyes at this, until you remember that the animal kingdom is already full of creatures that store and manufacture volatile things inside their own bodies. There are beetles that mix chemicals in a hardened chamber and fire a boiling, caustic spray out the back of them, again and again, without cooking themselves. There are fish that generate electricity. There are birds that carry enough toxin in their skin to sicken anything that touches them. Life is a far stranger chemist than we give it credit for. So imagine, deep in the dragon's chest, not one great lung, but a nest of chambers, some of them ordinary breathing air, others sealed. Biological factories slowly producing hydrogen gas as a byproduct of digestion, the way certain bacteria in a cow's stomach fill it with methane. That gas does two things at once, and both of them are useful. And this is the kind of quiet, overlapping efficiency that evolution loves. First, it is lighter than air, and pumped into the right internal bladders, it would take yet more weight off the frame so that the enormous creature is, in part, a living airship, buoyed from within so that the wings do not have to do all the lifting, only the steering and the thrust. And second, hydrogen burns, vent it forward over a spark. And biology has many ways to make a spark, from grinding minerals in a specialized gland to the simple chemistry of certain reactive metals eaten and stored. And the breath becomes a torch. Sit with the elegance of that for a moment, because it is the sort of detail that rewards slow attention. The The same gas that lets the animal fly is the gas that lets it burn the world. Buoyancy and weapon, born from the same slow rot of a meal in a dark gut. The dragon would not breathe fire because it is evil. It would breathe fire because it is full of the exhaust of its own digestion, and at some point in its long history, the individuals that could aim that exhaust and light it lived a little longer and ate a little better than the ones that could not. Now give it a place to live. A real dragon could not be everywhere, the way the myths scatter it across every kingdom at once. An animal this large, this demanding, would need enormous territory and would tolerate no rivals inside it. Think of the great solitary predators we still have. The way a single tiger holds a range you could walk for days without crossing its edge. The way it patrols and marks and defends every mile of it. Now scale that hunger up to something the size of a passenger jet. A single adult dragon might claim an entire mountain range, not a cave, a range, the high, cold, broken country that human beings have always found hardest to settle. The sheer peaks, the glacial valleys, the places where the air thins and the roads give up, that emptiness on the map, the gray and white nothing between the towns, would not be empty at all. It would be occupied, and it would nest high, where nothing could reach it. Picture the eyrie of an eagle, a mess of branches on a ledge no human hand can climb to, and now make it a cathedral of bone and stripped timber, wedged into a cliff face 1,000 feet above the nearest valley floor. The creature would spend much of its life aloft or asleep on that ledge. And here is where the myth of the horde starts to make a cold kind of sense. A nesting site used for decades, for a century, for longer than any human memory, would accumulate things. The bones of every meal, the metal buckles and blades and coins that came in on the bodies of the livestock and the unlucky and were never digested. Over a long enough life, the floor of the nest would glitter. The dragon would not gather gold because it loves gold. It would simply outlive everything it ever killed. And the incorruptible things, the gold, the steel, the stone, would be all that was left, piling up beneath it season after season, until it slept on a bed of the leftovers of centuries. How would it hunt? Not the way the stories love to show it. Wheeling low over a burning village in a great roar of flame. Fire is expensive. That hydrogen took days of digestion to make. And an animal does not squander its best weapon on a whim. No. Watch the real hunters, and you will see the truth of it. The dragon would hunt from height and from patience. It would ride the thermals, the columns of warm air that rise off sun-heated rock in the late afternoon, and it would circle so high that from the ground it would be nothing, a speck, a trick of the eye, a bird too far to name, and it would watch. It would watch the herds move through the valleys, the cattle and the deer, and the slow scatter of people, and it would wait for the one that strayed, the one that lagged, the one caught in the open with nowhere to run, and then it would fold its wings and fall, not fly down, fall, a stoop the way a falcon drops, but a falcon the size of a house, tons of muscle and hollow bone turned into a single silent spear pointed at the earth. The prey would not hear it coming, because there would be nothing to hear, only the faint tearing of air far too late. The fire, if it came at all, would come at the very end, or not at all. A short, controlled burst to panic a herd into scattering the wrong way, to flush the weak one out, to turn ordered flight into blind stampede. The kill itself would be simpler and older than fire. Weight, talons, the whole crushing mass of the animal arriving at once, and then the long, heavy climb back to the ledge, a carcass hanging limp beneath it. Wing beats you could feel in your chest from a mile off, slow as a heartbeat. And so, imagine what the world does in response, not the world of the old stories, with its knights and its lonely castles. Our world, the world of satellites and flight paths and highways, threaded through every valley, a world with a living dragon in it, would be a world that had quietly, permanently given ground. There would be regions on the aviation charts marked in a particular red, no-fly corridors that no pilot would dream of testing, whole slabs of mountain airspace surrendered without a war. There would be ranching country at the foot of certain ranges where the herds came in every night to great covered barns, not against wolves, but against the thing that hunts from the ceiling of the sky. There would be a season, the calving season, the hungry season after a long winter, when the people who live nearest the peaks simply do not go up, and teach their children why in the same low voice their grandparents used, and on the clearest evenings, when the last of the sun is caught on the high snow, and everything in the valley has gone still and violet and cold, you might stand at your window in that world and look up at the thin, bright edge of the mountains and see, for just a moment, a shape cross in front of the first star, too big, too slow, gone before your mind can argue with your eyes, and you would pull the window shut and be glad of the walls, and be glad you live down here in the warm and the low country, where the noise is, where the light is, where the old cold king of the peaks has no reason to come. That is the dragon, if we let it be real, not a demon, not a curse, just an animal, the largest and loneliest that ever flew, folded so perfectly into the emptiest places on the map that we would build our entire world in the quiet spaces it left us, follow the old trade roads east out of the Mediterranean, across the dry uplands where the grass gives way to stone, and you begin to find a different creature guarding the edges of the world. Not the serpent this time, something with 4 legs and a beak, something with the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle, crouched over a fortune in raw gold, watching the road with a stillness that meant it had watched it for a very long time. The griffin is one of the oldest hybrids the human imagination ever assembled, and unlike the dragon, it did not come from everywhere at once. It came from a particular place, and it came with a particular job. In the art of the ancient Near East, in the palaces of the Assyrians and the Persians, in the frescoes of Bronze Age Crete, the lion eagle appears again and again as a guardian, flanking thrones, pacing the walls of temples, standing at the thresholds where power lived. It was a creature of borders and boundaries, of the line between the safe inside and the dangerous outside. To carve a griffin at your door was to say, something watches here, and it does not sleep, and it does not forgive. But the story that gave the griffin its strange, specific soul came from further out still, from the vast grasslands north of the Black Sea, from the nomads the Greeks called the Scythians. These were people who lived on horseback, who moved with the seasons, who knew the deep interior of the continent the way the settled Greeks never could. And they brought back a tale that the Greeks wrote down and puzzled over for centuries. Far to the east, they said, past the edge of the known lands, in a high desert of red earth and bone-dry wind, there was gold, gold in the ground, gold you could gather, and it was guarded guarded by four-legged birds the size of wolves that nested on the ground and tore apart anyone who came for the treasure. The one-eyed people who lived nearest, the Arimaspians, were said to be locked in an endless war with these creatures, stealing the gold, dying for it, coming back for more. For a long time this was filed away as pure invention, a traveler's tale stretched thin over too many retellings. But there is a thread in it that refuses to snap, and pulling on that thread leads somewhere genuinely uncanny. Go to where the Scythians said the griffins lived, the trade routes that ran east into Central Asia, into the red rock deserts of what is now Mongolia and the western reaches of China. Walk that ground with modern eyes, and you find something that would stop the breath of anyone who had grown up on the griffin story. You find, weathering out of the sand in enormous numbers, the bones of a beaked, four-legged animal about the size of a large dog, a frill of bone at the back of the skull that, half buried, looks like the beginnings of folded wings or a raised crest, a sharp hooked beak, nested clutches of eggs, laid on the open ground, and all of it lying, in some places, in soil streaked and salted with gold-bearing mineral. The creature in the ground is not a griffin. It is a small-horned dinosaur, a plant-eater that died out ages before any human walked that desert. But imagine the nomads and the miners who first came across those white bones lying on the red sand. A four-legged animal with a beak, guarding in the most literal sense the very ground the gold came out of. You would not need to lie. You would only need to describe exactly what you saw and let the years and the retellings do the rest. The griffin may be one of the oldest cases we have of human beings finding the bones of a vanished animal, and with no other framework to hold it, building a living monster to explain the dead one. A myth born not from fear of the dark, but from an honest attempt to read a landscape full of the dead. So let us take the honest attempt seriously, the way we did with the dragon, and ask the quiet question underneath, not the fossil, the idea. If the lion-eagle, the palaces carved, and the nomads feared were a real animal, breathing and hunting in the world as it is now, what kind of creature would it actually have to be? And here, the griffin turns out to be a far more plausible beast than the dragon, because everything it is made of already exists, and works, and hunts. Begin with the two halves it is stitched from, because they are not a random pairing. The lion and the eagle are not just the strongest land hunter and the strongest sky hunter that a Bronze Age mind could name. They are two solutions to the same problem: how to kill efficiently, and they overlap more than they seem to. Both are ambush and pursuit predators. Both use grasping and gripping to hold prey, while a second weapon does the killing. Both have forward-facing eyes, built for judging distance to a target rather than scanning for threats. The griffin is not a lion with a bird's head glued on. It is a single coherent predator that happens to carry the toolkit of both. And if you were designing a hunter for a very particular kind of country, you might arrive at something very close to it. That country is vertical. This is the key to the whole animal, and it is why the griffin, unlike the dragon, does not need to be the size of a barn or to defy the laws of weight. Think of the ground the griffin was always said to haunt, not fertile valleys, but high, broken, stony places, escarpments, canyon walls, the tumbled scree below great cliffs, the kind of terrain where a big cat can climb and stalk and leap, and where the updrafts off the sun-warmed rock give a large bird everything it needs to stay aloft for hours without a single wing beat. A creature that could both climb the rock like a cat and ride the air above it like a raptor would own that landscape completely because it could hunt in a dimension nothing else could follow. Give it, then, the body it would need, not enormous. Nothing that flies can be truly enormous. We learned that from the dragon, but powerful and compact, perhaps the mass of a large leopard, dense with muscle across the shoulders and the hindquarters. The forelimbs are the strange, beautiful compromise. They must serve as both the anchor of a wing and the grasping, killing tool of a cat. And evolution would have to choose how to split the difference. Picture a limb that is, in flight, the leading edge of a broad soaring wing, the long feathers running back off a lengthened arm, and that, folded down on the rock, becomes a heavy grasping forelimb tipped in hooked talons, capable of pinning a struggling animal to the stone. The hind legs stay pure cat, the great driving muscles, the spring, the four-clawed feet that grip the slope, and the head, the eagle's head, carries the second weapon. Not teeth, but a beak built for shearing, for taking the killing bite at throat or spine once the talons have done the holding. Now watch it hunt, and watch how completely it would rule its cliffs. In the cool of the morning, it is on the rock, a shape the color of the stone itself, climbing. It moves the way a cat moves on a slope, deliberate, testing each hold, flowing upward through the broken ground toward a ledge, where the wild goats have come to graze the thin grass. This is the cat half of the animal at work. Patience, cover, the slow closing of distance across a surface no flying thing could stalk across. It gets close, closer than a bird ever could, and when the goats finally sense it and break, scattering along the cliff face where their whole survival is built on the fact that nothing can follow them across a sheer wall, the griffin does the thing that makes it a griffin. It steps off the cliff. It does not fall. It opens, and the wing that was a folded forelimb becomes a wing again, and it drops into the updraft that is always pouring up the face of a sunlit cliff, and it turns that plunge into a controlled, banking glide out over the drop. Now it is the eagle. Now the goats' one advantage. The vertical world where nothing can chase them is worthless because the hunter is in the air beside them, matching them along the wall, and there is nowhere on that cliff they can go that it cannot reach. It picks its animal, it closes, the talons take the goat off the rock in a single grip, the beak finds the neck, and the whole struggle tips outward into empty air, hunter and prey falling together until the wings spread and the griffin carries its kill in a long, heavy sinking glide down to a ledge below. This is the thing to sit with about the griffin, the detail that repays slow attention. It is not powerful because it is large. It is powerful because it erases the safe direction. Every prey animal in the world survives by knowing which way is the way out. Up the cliff, down the slope, into the dense brush, out across the open. The whole architecture of a grazing animal's fear is a map of escape routes, and the griffin, by being both cat and bird at once, closes the routes one by one. Climb the rock to escape the cat, and the bird is above you. Take to the open air of the drop to escape the bird, and you are exactly where its talons want you. There is no correct choice. That is a rare and terrible kind of predator, and it explains, better than any tale of gold, why the ancient world made the griffin a guardian. It watches the border, and the border is closed in every direction at once. Where would it nest? And here the old story and the real animal shake hands again. On the ground, the Scythians said, out in the open of the high desert, guarding its clutch, and that is exactly where a creature like this would nest. Not high in a tree, which could never bear it, but on a broad protected ledge or a shelf of rock partway up a cliff, unreachable from above or below, where it could lay its eggs in the open and defend them against anything foolish enough to make the climb. The nest would be a scrape, lined with the accumulated debris of many seasons, and around it, worked into the rock and the dust, the bones of every kill, not gold in the real world, but to a nomad watching from a distance, a beaked four-legged animal crouched fiercely over a nest of pale eggs on the very ground the miners feared to dig. The line between guarding a clutch and guarding a treasure would blur into nothing. Think, then, of what a world with living griffins would feel like from the low country, from the safe valleys where the people are. It would be a quieter surrender than the dragons. No burning, no fear from the sky over your fields, because the griffin wants nothing to do with the flatlands or the crowds. It is a creature of the high edges, the places the maps still color in the pale browns of high altitude, but the mountains would belong to it, the passes that climbers love, the ridgelines, the great cliff amphitheaters where the air rises off the rock in the afternoon. Those would be understood in that world as occupied territory. There would be routes no one takes. There would be a particular kind of silence in the high country, a watchfulness, because to walk beneath a griffin's cliff is to have already been seen long ago by eyes built to judge the exact distance to a moving thing far below, and perhaps on a long climb in that other world, resting on a ledge with the whole valley falling away blue and cold beneath you. You might look up at the cliff above and see it, not moving, not hunting, simply there, folded on its ledge in the sun, lion and eagle at rest. The beaked head turned to watch you with an ancient and unbothered patience. It would not come for you. You are too large, too much trouble, too far from the goats it prefers. It would only watch, the way it has watched every road and every border and every intruder since the first palace carved its likeness at the door, and you would climb back down, slowly, carefully, into the low green world, where the air is thick and the ground is flat, and the old guardian of the high places has no interest in following. That is the griffin, if we let it be real, not a chimera of a frightened mind, but a single elegant hunter built for the one landscape we have never truly conquered, the vertical world of the high stone, where it closes every escape and guards every edge, exactly as the oldest palaces always said it would. Leave the high stone behind now, and the thin bright air, and come down instead to the one part of the world where human beings have always been guests and never masters. Come down to the sea, and not the bright skin of it where the light still reaches, but the deep beneath that. The cold black miles that begin where the sunlight fails and go down and down into a darkness that has never once been troubled by a dawn. The Norse knew that darkness had something in it. The sailors who crossed the gray North Atlantic in open boats, who fished the deep water off the Scandinavian coasts and the long cold shelf toward Greenland, brought back a name for it that has never stopped echoing, the kraken. They spoke of it low, the way people speak of things they half hope are not true. An island that was not an island, a back that broke the surface, dark and vast. that a crew might mistake for land and even row toward, until the land began to sink. They spoke of a whirlpool that opened where no whirlpool should be, a great sucking of water as something below drew breath or dove. They spoke of arms that came up out of the swell in the failing light, taller than the mast, that closed around a ship the way your hand closes around a twig, and drew it down without hurry into the water, and were gone, and left nothing, no wreckage, no cry, only the sea smoothing itself over, as if the vessel had never floated there at all. For centuries, the learned world set the kraken aside with the sea serpents and the mermaids, a sailor's exaggeration, a fear-given fins. And then, slowly, the sea began to hand up evidence that the sailors had not been lying so much as measuring badly. Fishermen found arms, single severed limbs, longer than a rowboat, ringed with sucker scars. Whalers cutting open the great sperm whales found in the stomachs and scarring the thick skin, the marks of a struggle with something that fought back on a scale nobody wanted to imagine. Circular scars the width of a dinner plate, gouged into the hide of the largest predator in the ocean, and at last, rarely, the thing itself washed up or was hauled from the deep. The giant squid, real, undeniable, its eye the size of a human head, its body trailing arms, and two longer hunting tentacles into a length that could span the deck of a ship. The kraken was not invented. It was glimpsed and misremembered and grown in the telling. But the seed of it was down there the whole time, exactly where the sailors said, in the cold black water beyond the reach of the light. So we take the seed and we ask our question. The real giant squid is enormous by the standards of anything you have ever held, but it is not the kraken of the sagas. It does not pull down ships. It fights and mostly loses against the whales that hunt it. It drifts through the deep, as much hunted as hunter. But what if it did not stop there? What if, in the version of the world we are building tonight, the sea had gone further and made the thing the Norse actually described? Not a large squid, but a true leviathan of the deep, a cephalopod grown to the size the myth insists on. What would that animal have to be? And how would it live? And what would it do to a world that still, even now, floats its entire economy across the top of the water it lived beneath? Start with why the sea, of all places, could hide something that large. Because this is the first thing that makes the kraken more plausible than instinct wants to allow. On land, weight is the enemy. The dragon taught us that. A creature the size of a whale out of the water would be crushed slowly to death by its own mass, unable to breathe under the weight of itself. But water does not care how large you are. Water holds you. The sea carries the blue whale, the largest animal that has ever existed on this planet, larger than any dinosaur, effortlessly, its great body weightless in the embrace of the water. The deep ocean is the one environment on Earth where size is nearly free. A cephalopod the size of the kraken breaks no law down there. It only needs enough cold, dark, food-rich water to sustain it. And the deep sea is the largest habitat on the planet, a volume so vast and so unexplored that we have mapped the surface of other worlds in more detail than we have mapped its floor. Give the animal its body, then, and build it from what the real cephalopods already are, because they are stranger and more capable than any invented monster. Start with the skin, because the skin alone would make it a nightmare to ever see coming. The squids and the octopuses are the great illusionists of the animal world. Their skin is a living screen, packed with millions of tiny sacs of pigment that they can open and close in an instant, and layers beneath that bend and throw back light. A cephalopod can turn the exact gray-green of the water around it, can ripple a shadow across itself to match a passing cloud of plankton, can vanish against any background it chooses in less time than it takes you to blink. Now scale that up to a body the length of a ship. The kraken would not rise from the deep as a looming dark shape. It would rise as a piece of the sea itself, indistinguishable from the water, a stretch of ocean that was quietly, patiently alive. Give it the eye, that famous eye, the size of a dinner plate on the real giant squid, and on our kraken, the size of a hatch cover, a great black disk built to gather the last failing crumbs of light 1,000 feet down where a human eye would register only perfect black. In that darkness the kraken sees. It sees the faint silhouettes of things swimming above it against the barely there glow of the far surface. It sees the pale flicker of a fish, the drifting shape of a whale, the long dark keel of something floating on the skin of the world, far overhead, and it watches, hanging motionless in the cold, its arms trailing down into the dark below it, its whole vast body doing nothing, spending nothing, waiting, because this is how it would hunt, and the manner of it is the quietest horror in all of this. A creature that large cannot afford to chase. Chasing burns energy, and energy in the deep sea is precious and scarce, drifting down slowly from the distant living surface as a thin rain of scraps. So, the kraken would be an ambush hunter, and the deep sea is the perfect theater for ambush, because sound and pressure and darkness all conspire to hide the hunter until the last instant. It would hang in the water column below the layer where its prey travels, silent, camouflaged, patient in a way no land animal ever needs to be. And when a large enough shape passed overhead, a great fish, a whale, or the long slow shadow of a hull, it would not roar and charge. It would rise, straight up, through the dark, propelled by the smooth, silent jet of water, through its own body, no wing beat, no splash, no warning. A shape the size of the sea itself, accelerating upward out of the black. The two long hunting tentacles strike first, faster than the eye could follow even if there were light to follow them by. Whipping up and out to their full reach, the clubbed ends studded with hooks and gripping suckers slamming into the prey and holding. Then the 8 thick arms follow, folding up and over and around, each one lined its whole length with rings of suckers that grip like 100 small mouths, and the prey is drawn inward, down toward the center, where the arms meet, where the great beak waits. That beak is the one hard part of the whole soft animal, a shearing hook of dense material, sharp enough and strong enough to bite clean through bone, opening and closing at the center of that ring of arms, like the heart of a closing flower. And all of it happens without sound, without struggle that reaches the surface, in the space of a few held breaths. The strike, the grip, the pull down, the sea closing over, smooth and gray and empty, exactly as the sailors said. Nothing left, nothing to find. Sit with the pressure and the cold of the world it does this in, because that world is a kind of terrible peace, and understanding it is the whole point of following the kraken down 1,000 feet below the surface. The weight of all that water bears down with a force that would collapse a submarine's steel. The cold is a steady, lightless 4 degrees, unchanging, the same in summer and winter, the same by day and by night, because down there, day and night have never meant anything. There is no sound but the deep low groan of the pressure itself and the occasional far call of a whale arriving from miles away as if from another world. There is no weather, there is no season, there is only the slow drift of the cold, black water and the soft rain of the dead sinking down from the bright, dangerous surface where all the noise and all the light and all the trouble of the living world take place. The kraken lives beneath all of that. It has never seen the sun. It has never needed to. It hangs in the dark and the cold and the crushing stillness, unbothered, unhurried, at the bottom of a silence deeper than any silence the land has ever known. Now bring it up into our world, the world of container ships longer than the kraken itself, of shipping lanes threaded like highways across every ocean, of the vast quiet commerce that floats above the deep every hour of every day. A world with a true kraken in it would be a world that had learned, at great cost, to read the water. There would be regions of the deep ocean, over the great trenches and the cold, nutrient-rich upwellings where the animal thrived, that ships simply routed around. Not because every crossing meant death, but because enough of them had ended in a distress signal that stopped midward and a hull that was never found. The maps of the seafloor would carry the same quiet warnings the old mapmakers scrawled at the edges of the land, and the shipping lines would bend around them the way a road bends around a mountain, adding days to a voyage rather than passing over the wrong dark water. There would be a science of it in that world, listening arrays strung across the deep, straining to hear the movement of something that moves without sound, the whole enterprise defeated by an animal built from the ground up to make no sound at all. There would be fishermen who would not work certain grounds after dark and could not fully say why, only that their grandfathers had marked those waters, and the marking had never been questioned. And there would be, on the great ships crossing the deep lanes at night, a particular unease among the crew when the sea went strangely flat and still, when the swell smoothed out over deep water, for no reason the sky could explain, because every sailor in that world would know, the way the Norse knew that a sudden smoothness on deep water is sometimes not calm at all. Sometimes it is something below, rising slowly, drawing the water up around itself, opening a great pale eye toward the dark shape of your hull passing overhead. And you, imagine you are on the rail of such a ship, late, the deck lights small and yellow behind you, the black water sliding past far below, phosphorescence turning in the wake like cold green sparks. You would not see it. That is the thing to hold on to, the thing that is almost restful in its finality. Nobody ever really sees the kraken. It is the color of the water, and it moves without a sound, and it lives in a dark your eyes were never built for. You would only feel, perhaps, a strange lift in the swell, a slow smoothing of the sea, a sense, old as the first sailor, that the deep beneath your feet was not empty, and then the ship would carry you on into the dark, over water miles deep, and whatever hung below in the cold would let you pass and settle again and return to the long patient silence it has kept since, before there were ships to trouble, the light above it. That is the kraken, if we let it be real, not a demon of the deep, but the largest ambush hunter the planet could hold, a creature of pure cold patience, hanging unseen in the one darkness we have never conquered, letting the whole loud bright world of the surface float past overhead, and rising now and then, without a sound, to remind us whose water it always was. Come up out of the deep water now, back into the air and the light, but not into the green places, Come instead to the dry country, the sun-cracked stone, the ruined walls, the abandoned wells, and the crumbling foundations where the grass has given up and the lizards bask on hot rock in the long afternoon. This is where the ancients placed the smallest and strangest of all their monsters, not the largest, the deadliest, a creature no bigger than your forearm that could kill a man with a look and poison the ground it crawled across for a generation. They called it the king of serpents. They called it the basilisk. The name itself carries the crown. It comes from the old Greek word for a little king, and that is exactly how the ancient world imagined it. A small serpent that ruled the other serpents that they fled before, that wore a pale marking on its head like a crown or a diadem. The Roman naturalist Pliny, who gathered up every rumor of the natural world he could find and wrote them all down with the same steady seriousness, described it in terms that have haunted the imagination ever since. It was small, he said, no more than a span in length. It moved not by slithering along the whole of its body like an honest snake, but with its head and forepart raised high off the ground, upright, advancing across the earth like a thing that considered itself above the dust. And everything about it was death. Its breath withered the shrubs and scorched the grass. Its venom was so potent that a man on horseback who speared it would die of the poison traveling up the shaft, and the horse beneath him with him, and its gaze alone, the simple meeting of its eyes with yours, was fatal. To be looked at by the basilisk was to die where you stood. The medieval world took this small horror and made it stranger still. The bestiaries, those careful catalogues of real and unreal beasts that the monks copied and illustrated by candlelight, gave the basilisk a monstrous birth. It hatched, they said, from a rare and unnatural egg, an egg laid by an aging rooster and brooded by a serpent or a toad in the warm dark. From that wrong union came the wrong creature, part bird, part snake, crowned and lethal. And because every monster must have a weakness, the bestiaries gave it two, and both are worth holding in mind. The first was the weasel, a small, fierce animal, said to be the only thing that could go down into the basilisk's lair and kill it and survive, immune somehow to the poison, willing to die in the killing. And the second, more famous, was the mirror. The basilisk's gaze was death, but it was death to the basilisk too. Catch that killing look and turn it back upon itself, and the creature would die of its own stare. A knight who would face the basilisk carried a polished shield or a sheet of glass, and let the monster meet its own eyes, and let its own weapon do the work. Strip away the rooster's egg and the deadly stare, and you may wonder what could possibly be left. But there is something left, and it has scales, and it is real, and it lives in exactly the dry, sunlit, dangerous places the basilisk was always said to haunt. The ancient world knew the cobra. It knew the small, upright serpents of the desert and the ruin, the ones that rear the forepart of the body off the ground and spread a hood and hold the gaze of a man with a terrible stillness before they strike. It knew the spitting serpents that can throw their venom through the air, aiming for the eyes, blinding at a distance without ever touching their target. Put those real things together, a serpent that stands upright, that fixes you with its eyes, that can strike your eyes from across a gap, whose venom kills swiftly, and whose bite no ordinary person survives. And you do not have to invent very much at all to arrive at the king of serpents. The basilisk is the desert cobra, Seen through the lens of pure terror, its real and genuinely lethal gifts stretched just slightly past the edge of the possible. So let us stretch them back and build the animal and ask what a real basilisk, a true one, exactly as deadly as the legend but obeying the rules of living things, would be, and how it would hunt and what it would do to the map of the dry country. Make it small first, because its smallness is its whole strategy and the source of its dread. A great predator you can see coming. A great predator claims a mountain range or a stretch of deep sea, and you route around it, and you know where it is. But a killer, the length of your arm, the color of the dust and the dry stone, that lies still in the rubble of an old wall that you cannot route around, because you never know you are near it until you are far too close. The basilisk's power is not size. It is concealment plus lethality. The two most dangerous things a small animal can combine. It would be patterned like broken stone and dead grass, banded in the grays and tawny browns of the ruin, and it would lie in the warm rubble, utterly motionless, a fold of shadow among the fallen blocks, invisible until it chose not to be. Give it the upright carriage the ancients always insisted on, and give it a reason for it, because the reason is real. A serpent that holds the forepart of its body raised off the ground is a serpent that can see over the low cover, that can survey the flat, dry ground around it, and that is coiled and loaded to strike downward and forward in an instant. The cobra does exactly this. Our basilisk would do it better, rearing higher, holding that upright watch for long, patient hours. The crowned head turning slowly, the great lidless eyes scanning the heat shimmer for the small movement that means a meal, and here the killing gaze finds its natural, unmagical truth. The basilisk would not kill you by looking at you, but it would hold you with its look, the flat, unblinking, utterly still stare of a serpent that has fixed its target, the stare that freezes small prey in place by triggering the deepest instinct a hunted thing has, the instinct to go absolutely still and hope not to be seen. That stare is not a myth. It is the last thing a great many small animals ever experience, and to a human being who meets it across a few feet of ruined stone, the old belief that the look itself is death would feel like the plainest truth in the world. Now give it the venom and make it the thing the legend feared, not a bite that sickens, but a bite that ends. And give it, from the real spitting serpents, the range the ancients marveled at. A basilisk cornered, or a basilisk striking, could throw a fine spray of venom through the air with astonishing accuracy, aimed at the eyes, the softest and most defenseless target on any face, from a body length away, without ever touching you. It could blind, and in blinding, buy itself the moment it needs. This is the spitting cobra's real gift, and in our basilisk it becomes the killing look, made literal. The creature reaches out across the empty air and strikes your eyes, and the ancient terror of a gaze that kills becomes a plain fact of the animal's biology. It does not need to touch you to hurt you. It only needs to see you first, which, lying still in the dust, the color of itself, it always will. Watch it hunt then, and see how quiet and how sunlit its violence would be. It does not pursue. It has no need. It chooses a place, a warm crack in a ruined wall beside a game trail, the lip of an old dry well, where the small desert animals come at dusk to search for water that is no longer there, a hollow beneath a sun-baked stone, where the lizards and the ground birds pass, and it settles, and it becomes the stone. Hours pass. The heat climbs and breaks, and the shadows lengthen. The basilisk does not move. And then something small comes down the trail, a rodent, a bird, a young hare, and it comes closer and closer, and it never sees the fold of shadow gather itself, because the fold of shadow does not move until the very last instant, and then the strike is faster than the eye, the upright body uncoiling downward and forward, the fangs, the venom, and the prey is dead before it understands it was seen, and the basilisk settles back and waits for the poison to finish its work, and then feeds, and then becomes the stone again. There is no chase, no struggle, no sound that would carry 10 feet, only the sun and the dust, and one small death, and the long patient stillness closing over it. But here's the detail that would make the basilisk's world truly strange, the thing that lifts it out of being merely a dangerous small snake and into being the poisoner of the earth, the legends called it. Consider what happens where such a creature lives and hunts and dies over many generations. Its venom is potent enough to kill large animals. Its kills, half-eaten and abandoned, seed the ground with the bodies of the poisoned. Its very presence teaches every other living thing to stay away. The birds do not nest there. The grazing animals do not graze there. The other serpents, as the ancients said, flee the little king and leave its territory to it alone. And so, a place where basilisks live becomes, over time, a dead zone, a stretch of ruin or dry valley that is subtly, permanently emptier than the land around it. No birdsong, no scurry of rodents in the rubble, no tracks in the dust, but the strange upright trail of the thing itself. The old belief that the basilisk's breath withered the plants and poisoned the ground was, in its way, an honest observation of a real effect. Not chemistry, but ecology. Where the deadliest small hunter rules, life simply thins out and goes quiet and moves away, and the land takes on the still, watchful, abandoned feeling of a place that something has claimed. So picture the world with real basilisks in it. It would not be a world of surrendered mountain ranges or forbidden shipping lanes. The basilisk asks for so little ground. It would be a world of small forbidden places, scattered across the dry countries like dark beads, a particular ruin the local people do not enter, an old well the children are warned away from, in a voice that does not invite questions, a stretch of tumbled stone at the edge of a field that the farmer plows around and never through. There would be a knowledge in that world of how to read a landscape for the signs, the unnatural quiet, the absence of birds, the way the smaller creatures give a certain patch of ground a wide and wordless berth. People would learn to trust that silence the way we learn to trust a red light. And they would learn, above all, not to reach blindly into the shadowed cracks of any old warm wall, because the shadow you reach toward in the dry country might be watching you already, might have been watching you for a long time, might lift its crowned head and hold your eyes for one still, endless moment before it strikes. And the mirror, even the mirror keeps a small strange truth. A basilisk, meeting its own reflection in a still pool or a sheet of glass, would see what it is built to react to. Another basilisk, upright, staring, holding its gaze, and it might do what serpents do to a rival that will not look away, rear higher, spread wider, strike. The knights were wrong about why it worked, but a creature that kills what it stares down could, in the end, be undone by the one enemy it can never outlast. Itself, looking back, that is the basilisk, if we let it be real, not a curse hatched from a wrong egg, but the smallest and most patient killer the dry world could make. a fold of poison, the color of the dust, ruling its little kingdom of silence, teaching everything that lives to leave one quiet corner of the map alone. Leave the dry ruins now, and the small crowned killer that rules them, and travel north again into the great forests, the old forests of Europe, the ones that once covered the whole continent, from the Atlantic coast to the eastern plains, a darkness of oak and pine and beech so deep that a traveler could walk for days beneath the branches and never once step into open sun. This is the home of a different fear, older than the castles, older than the kings, a fear that lives in the space between the human and the animal, in the terrible suspicion that the line between the two is thinner than we would like to believe. This is the country of the werewolf. Of all the monsters the human imagination has made, the werewolf is the most intimate because it is not truly a beast at all. It is us. It is the neighbor, the traveler, the quiet man at the edge of the village, who under a certain sky sheds the shape of a person and puts on the shape of a wolf and goes out into the dark with a hunger that no human law can hold. The idea is ancient, and nearly everywhere the wolf and the human ever shared a forest. The Greeks told of a king turned to a wolf as punishment for a monstrous crime, doomed to run the hills in his new and terrible form. The Norse warriors, the fiercest of them, were said to wear the skins of wolves and to fight in a frenzy that was more animal than man. But it was in the deep medieval forests of France and Germany and the Baltic lands that the werewolf took the shape we still know. The man who changes, the change tied to the moon, the nights of terror, when livestock was found torn in the fields and children did not come home, and the villagers looked at one another in the morning and wondered which of them had worn the other face. That fear was not abstract. In the late medieval and early modern centuries, in the same years and often the same courts that hunted witches, people were tried and condemned as werewolves, men accused of shedding their skins by night, of running with the wolves, of falling upon the flocks, and worse. We can look back now and see frightened people trying to explain the unexplainable, the real wolves that did, in hard winters, come out of the starving forest and take livestock and sometimes people, the rare and genuine human cruelties that needed a name the village could bear to speak. But underneath the fear and the injustice, there is a question the werewolf asks more sharply than any other monster, and it is a question about the moon and about the tide of the blood and about how much of the animal still lives inside the shape of a civilized thing. Set aside the man who becomes a wolf. Keep the part the legend was really circling. What if there were a real animal, never human, always a beast, whose life and whose hunger ran on the phases of the moon? What would that creature be? And how would it hunt? And why would the deep forest on certain nights become a place that people simply do not enter? Begin with the moon itself, because this is the part that instinct dismisses and biology quietly confirms. The idea that a living thing could be governed by the phases of the moon sounds like pure superstition. And then you look at the sea, and the whole ocean rises and falls twice a day under the moon's pull, and vast tides of living things move with it. Corals across entire reefs spawn on a single night, keyed to the lunar cycle. All at once, the whole reef releasing life into the water under a particular moon. Countless creatures time their breeding, their movement, their feeding to the waxing and waning of that light. The moon is not a magic lantern. It is the largest and most reliable clock in the night sky, brightening and darkening on a steady rhythm. And life on this planet has been reading clocks like that since life began. An animal tuned to the moon is not a fantasy. It is simply an animal that has made the oldest light in the world into a calendar. So build the werewolf as that animal. A large forest canid, never anything but a canid, but one whose behavior turns on the lunar cycle in a way that would look to a frightened people like the work of a curse, and the key to it is the light. The full moon is not just a symbol, it is a real and dramatic change in the conditions of the night. On the nights around the full moon, the forest floor, even beneath the canopy, is washed in a pale silver light strong enough to hunt by. On the nights around the new moon, that same forest is a blackness so total that a hunting animal is nearly blind. A predator that hunts by sight and by coordinated movement, a pack hunter, would find its whole world transformed across that cycle. And so, our werewolf would be a creature whose hunting reached its peak precisely when the moon was full. Not because the moon changed its body, but because the moon lit its battlefield. Give it the body of a great wolf pushed to its limit, larger than any wolf that runs the forests now, heavier through the chest and the shoulders, built for the burst of speed and the crushing grip, but built above all for endurance, for the long tireless trot that eats up miles of dark forest through the whole of a night. Give it the senses that the human werewolf legends fumbled toward without understanding. A nose that reads the forest like a written page, that knows what passed this way, and how long ago, and whether it was wounded or afraid. Ears that turn independently to catch the snap of a twig a quarter-mile off. Eyes with the silver mirror behind them that gathers the faintest moonlight and throws it back, turning the pale full moon forest into something it can see through clearly, while its prey stumbles half blind. And give it, most of all, the thing that makes wolves the most successful hunters the northern forests ever produced: the pack, the mind that is not one mind but many, moving as a single organism, communicating in glances and postures, and the low sounds beneath a human's hearing, closing on prey from 3 directions at once, with a coordination that looks, to anything on the receiving end of it, like intelligence with a plan. Now watch the cycle turn, and watch the forest change with it, because the rhythm of it is the whole strange heart of the animal. Through the dark of the moon, when the nights are black and blind, the werewolf pack does little. It rests. It lies up in the deep cover, in the dens and the thickets, and it waits, hunting little and sparingly, conserving itself. Because to hunt in that total darkness is to burn energy for nothing. The forest in the dark of the moon is, if anything, safer than it has any right to be. The great predator is quiet, holding itself in reserve, and then, night by night, the moon returns. It thickens from a blade to a curve to a half to a swelling disk, and as it grows, the light on the forest floor grows with it, and something in the pack begins to wake and gather and grow restless. The hunger has been building through the lean dark nights. The light is returning. The battlefield is lighting up. And on the nights around the full moon, when the whole forest lies silver and clear beneath the branches, and the pack can see and move and coordinate at the peak of its power, that is when the werewolf hunts in earnest. And it hunts the way the pack hunts, which is the most methodical and patient violence in all of nature. It does not fall upon its prey in a single mad rush. It tests. It moves along the herd, the deer, the wild boar, the scattered livestock at the forest's edge, and it reads them, and it finds the old one, the sick one, the young one, the one that runs a half step slow, and then the pack begins the long pressure that is its true weapon, not the teeth, but the relentlessness, the coordinated closing, the way one wolf shows itself to turn the prey, while the others wait in the dark ahead, the way the chase is steered, rather than simply run until the exhausted animal is driven exactly where the pack meant it to go. And the ending comes quickly in a place the prey was herded to, without ever knowing it was being herded. Through the whole silver night, this would unfold across miles of moonlit forest, silent but for the drum of hooves and the soft passage of many bodies through the undergrowth, a hunt that reads less like an attack and more like the slow closing of a trap that thinks, and so understand what the full moon would come to mean in a world where this animal was real. It would not be a symbol, it would be a warning written across the sky, visible to everyone, impossible to miss. The people who lived at the forest's edge would watch the moon fatten night by night, with the same wary attention a coastal people watch a rising tide, because they would know exactly what the full of the moon brought out of the trees. There would be nights, the 2 or 3, around the full moon in the hungry seasons, when no one went into the forest and the livestock was brought in close and shut behind stout walls, and the doors were barred not against a spirit or a curse, but against a pack of great hunting animals that had learned over uncounted generations that the bright nights were the nights to feed. The old rhythm of the werewolf tales, the monster that comes with the full moon and sleeps through the dark of it, would simply be the observed truth of the animal's life, dressed by frightened people in the only clothes they had, the clothes of magic and transformation, and the man who wears another face, stand, then, in that world, at the edge of the old forest on a night when the moon is coming full. The light is extraordinary. You can see the individual trees at the tree line, the silver on the wet grass of the meadow, the black wall of the woods beyond. Everything is bright and still and cold and clear, and out of that stillness, from somewhere deep in the moonlit trees, comes a sound that lifts the hair on your arms before your mind has even named it. A long, low rising call, and then another, answering it from a different quarter of the forest, and a third from somewhere between. The pack speaking to itself across the miles, gathering, coordinating, beginning. You would go inside. You would bar the door, not out of superstition, but out of the plainest good sense, and you would be glad of the walls and the fire and the low warm room, and you would listen to the calls, move through the bright forest, all through that silver night. And in the morning, when the moon was down and the sun came up on the wet meadow, you would find the tracks at the tree line, where the pack had come to the very edge of the open ground and stopped and looked at the small lights of the human world, and turned and gone back into the deep trees to lie up through the coming dark of the moon and wait for the light to return. That is the werewolf, if we let it be real, not a cursed man shedding his skin, but the oldest and most patient pack hunter of the northern forests, its whole life keyed to the great clock in the sky, sleeping through the blind dark, waking with the silver light, and teaching a whole world to look up at a fattening moon and understand exactly what its brightness meant. Go south now, out of the cold forests and down to the warm coast of the ancient Greek world, to the rocky country of Lycia, in what is now southern Turkey. Here the land itself is strange. In places the bare mountainside burns, flames rise straight out of the rock. Small, steady fires, that have no fuel a person can see, that the wind bends but never quite puts out, that have flickered on the same slopes for as long as anyone has kept the memory. And it was here, on ground that burned without wood, that the Greeks placed one of the most impossible monsters they ever imagined. A single creature stitched from 3 animals, breathing fire, ranging across the smoking hills. The chimera. The old accounts describe it plainly and strangely. It had the body and head of a lion at the front. From the middle of its back rose the head and neck of a goat, and its tail was a serpent, a living snake for a hindquarter with a head of its own that could turn and strike. 3 animals in one body, 3 heads, and from one of those mouths, fire. It laid the country waste, burning the fields and the flocks, until a hero was sent against it, Bellerophon, mounted on the winged horse, who alone could fight a fire breather from above, out of reach of the flames, and who at last put an end to it. It was, even to the Greeks, a byword for the impossible, the very definition of a thing that could not be, a jumble of parts that no honest world would ever assemble. And yet the burning ground was real. Those flames on the Lycian hillsides are real to this day. They are the work of natural gas, seeping up through cracks in the rock and igniting in the open air, a slow leak from deep in the earth that has kept the same slopes alight for thousands of years. Stand near those fires, and you understand at once where part of the monster came from. Here was ground that breathed fire. Here was a mountainside that burned without being consumed. A people who saw that and felt the need to give it a shape, a body, a hunger, might well have imagined a great beast living in the smoke, the source of the flame, and pieced it together from the animals they knew, the lion they feared, the goats that grazed those very slopes, the serpents that lived in the warm rock. The chimera may be the fire itself given a face. So take the impossible seriously, the way we have taken all the others, and ask what a real chimera would have to be. And here we have to be honest, because the chimera is the hardest of all our creatures to make real. A single body cannot simply grow 3 separate animal heads that each think their own thoughts. That is not how bodies are built. But there is a way to keep the spirit of the thing while giving it a living form, and it lies in reading the 3 heads not as 3 creatures, but as 3 tools on one animal, and in taking the fire and the burning ground as the center of everything. Build it then as a great predator of the geothermal country, the volcanic hills, the hot springs, the slopes where the earth is warm and the gas seeps up through the stone. Give it the lion's body and the lion's head as its true self, a powerful ambush hunter, heavy through the shoulders, built to bring down large prey on broken ground. The goat's head, rising from its back, need not be a second mind at all. Imagine instead a strange growth of the spine, a raised crest or a second set of horns, and a blunt browsing head. Perhaps a display structure, perhaps a thing grown to make the animal look larger and stranger to rivals, the way so many creatures wear crests and frills and false faces to seem more than they are. And the serpent tail, give it a real serpent's gift, a tail that ends in a striking, biting weapon, whether a true venomous tip or simply a heavy fanged club that can lash backward at anything attacking from behind. One animal, one mind, but armed at both ends and crowned in the middle, so that from any angle it presents teeth. Now the fire, which is the soul of the thing. We have already built one fire breather tonight, and the same logic that lit the dragon can light the chimera but here it belongs to the ground the animal lives on, a creature that made its home among the natural gas seeps, that denned in the warm rock where the earth itself leaks flammable breath, would live its whole life steeped in that gas. And it is not a great leap to imagine an animal that learned to use it, that could gulp and hold the seeping gas the way some fish gulp air, storing it in a chamber and vent it out over the sparking grind of specialized teeth or mineral-hard plates in its throat, turning a mouthful of the earth's own breath into a short, roaring gout of flame. It would not need to make the fire inside itself. It would only need to borrow it from the burning ground it already ruled. A hunter that drank the fire of the earth and breathed it back out. Watch it hunt on that smoking ground and see how the fire and the body work as one. It lives where few large animals willingly go. The hot slopes, the sulfur-smelling hollows, the ground that steams in the cool of the morning, and that alone gives it a kingdom with few rivals. It hunts the goats and the wild sheep that come to graze the mineral-rich grass near the vents, the deer that pass through, and it hunts them the way a lion hunts, from cover and by ambush, the great front end doing the killing. The fire is not the everyday weapon. Like the dragons, it is too costly for that. It is the thing it keeps in reserve. A blast to panic a herd into breaking the wrong way across the treacherous ground. A wall of flame flung between itself and a rival predator. A roaring threat that makes the smoking hillside even more its own. And the serpent tail guards its back while it feeds, so that nothing can come at it unseen, while its attention and its jaws are bent to the kill. And consider what the burning country would become in a world where this animal was real. The geothermal places, the volcanic slopes, the fields of vents and hot springs and burning seeps would be understood as its territory. And given the same wide berth, we have learned to give every one of these creatures its due. People already treat such ground with caution. It steams, it stinks of sulfur, it can burn, and it can poison the air in its hollows. Add to that a great fire-breathing hunter denned in the warm rock, and those slopes would become genuinely forbidden. A landscape where the earth breathes fire and something large lives in the smoke, exactly as the Greeks imagined. There would be no reason to go there, and every reason to stay away, and the country of the burning ground would belong, holy and undisturbed, to the beast that shared its fire. Picture it, then, from a safe distance at dusk. The hillside ahead of you is dotted with the small, steady flames that rise straight out of the rock, unmoving in the still evening air, throwing a low red light across the steaming ground. The air smells of sulfur and hot stone, and among those flames, where the light and the smoke blur together, something large shifts, a heavy shape moving through the fire-lit haze, unbothered by the heat, at home in it, pausing to lift a great head toward the cooling valley below where you stand. You would not go up. No one would. You would leave the burning slope to the thing that lived there and go back down into the cool green valley where the ground does not breathe and the air is clean, and let the fire country keep its ancient tenant alone among its flames. That is the chimera if we let it be real, not an impossible jumble of three beasts, but a single strange hunter of the burning ground, armed at both ends, crowned in the middle, breathing the borrowed fire of the earth it rules, folded perfectly into the one landscape too hot and too poisoned for anything else to want. Stay in the warm south a while longer. but turn away from the burning ground and the smoke. Kuiyiko, Maingseon, and lift your eyes instead to the sun itself, to the great disk rising over the desert, the oldest object of human worship, the thing that dies every evening in fire on the horizon and returns every dawn without fail. It was here, in the sun's own image, that the ancient world imagined its most beautiful monster, not a killer, not a thing to fear, a bird of fire that never truly ended, that died only to be born again out of its own ashes. The phoenix. It begins in Egypt, on the banks of the Nile, with a bird the Egyptians called the Bennu. It was tied to the sun and to the river, and to the daily miracle of the dawn, a heron-like bird of light that was said to have risen at the very first morning of the world, and to renew itself with the rising of each sun. The Greeks, who borrowed so much from Egypt, took the Bennu and made it the phoenix and gave it the story we still tell. A single bird, the only one of its kind, gorgeous beyond any other, its feathers the red and gold of living flame. It lived not a handful of years but centuries, 500, 1,000. The numbers grew with the telling, and when at last its long life drew toward its close, it did not simply die. It built a nest of fragrant wood and spices, and settled into it, and was consumed in fire, burned utterly to ash. And from that ash, from the very ruin of itself, a new phoenix rose, young and whole, to begin the long cycle again. The Chinese told of their own firebird, the fenghuang, a creature of the sun and the south and great good fortune, that appeared in times of peace and prosperity across the whole ancient world. Wherever people watched the sun burn down and rise again, they imagined a bird that did the same. There is nothing to fear in the phoenix, and that is exactly what makes it worth following. It is the one creature the human imagination built, not out of dread but out of hope. The hope that death is not the end, that from the ash something whole comes back, that the fire that destroys is also the fire that renews. And underneath that hope, as always, there is a question we can take seriously, not a bird that magically resurrects, but what if there were a real animal whose life was built around fire and around a span so long that, to the short-lived people who watched it, it would seem never truly to die at all? What would that creature be, and how would it live? And what would we make of a thing that outlasted every one of us? Begin with fire, because fire is where the phoenix lives. And fire in the natural world is not only destruction. There are whole landscapes that depend on it. There are forests that burn on a long, slow cycle and are renewed by the burning. The fire clearing the old growth and returning the nutrients to the soil and opening the ground to new life. And there are plants, real ones, whose seeds will only open in the heat of a fire, that lie dormant for years and germinate only when the flames pass over them, so that from the blackened, smoking ruin of a burned forest, green life rises directly out of the ash. The phoenix's great miracle, life coming out of fire, is not a fantasy at all. It is the plainest fact of the fire-shaped world. New life out of ash is happening somewhere on this planet every single year. So build the phoenix as a creature of that world, a great bird of the fire-prone country, the hot, dry lands where the long, slow burns come through on their cycle of years. Give it feathers not of literal flame, but of a color that seems to hold it, deep reds and burning golds and coppers that catch the low sun and throw it back so that the bird, crossing a dawn sky, looks lit from within. Give it a life keyed to the fire cycle, the way the werewolf's was keyed to the moon. a bird that does not flee the great fires, but follows them, that knows the burned ground is where the new life will rise, where the seeds will open and the insects will swarm in the fresh ash, and the whole ruined landscape will bloom again within a season. Where other creatures run from the smoke, the phoenix would fly toward it, riding the great columns of hot air the fires throw up, gathering at the edges of the burn to feed on everything the flames drive out and everything that rises from the ashes after, and give it the nest, which is the truest part of the whole legend. Picture a bird that builds its nest in the burned country, in the still warm ash of a recent fire, on ground that nothing else will touch. A nest woven of the aromatic, resinous wood and dry, spice-scented brush of the hot lands, the very materials the legend named. In that warm, sheltered, predator-free ash, it raises its young, and here the old story of death and rebirth finds its quiet, unmagical truth. The people who saw the phoenix vanish into the smoke and fire of a burning landscape, and then saw a phoenix rise from the same blackened ground weeks or months later, young and bright against the new green, would not be watching a single bird resurrect. They would be watching a parent give way to a chick, one generation passing into the fire and the next rising out of the ash. The cycle of the nest, mistaken for the cycle of a single, deathless life. The phoenix is real. It simply does its dying and its being born the way all birds do, one at a time, in a nest, in the safest place it can find, which happens to be the one place that looks to us like the heart of the fire. Now give it the last gift the legend insists on, the one that would truly set it apart. The long life. Make it one of the slow-living creatures, the kind that ages at a crawl. For there are animals that live far longer than we do, tortoises that outlast the humans who first found them, deep-sea creatures whose years run into centuries, a great bird that lived not decades but a very long time, that a person might see once as a child, and once again as an old man, and know it to be the same bird, unchanged, would seem to that person to stand outside of time altogether. It would appear at the edges of human lives, across generations, always the same, always bright, and the families who lived within its range would pass it down as a story that was also a fact, the firebird that their grandparents had seen, and their grandparents before them, the one creature in all the world that did not seem to grow old and did not seem to die. And so consider how a world with a real phoenix in it would treat such a thing. Unlike every other creature tonight, it would not be feared, and no ground would be surrendered to it in dread. It would be the opposite, protected, watched over, cherished, a bird that appeared only in the fire country, that followed the great burns, that seemed to live forever, and to bring new life in its wake, would become the most precious animal on earth. People would travel to the burned lands in the season after a fire, hoping only to glimpse it moving against the fresh green, a shape of copper and gold gliding low over the ash. It would be the one monster that humanity loved rather than avoided, a living proof, flying, that the fire which takes everything also gives everything back, that the burned ground is not the end of the story, but the middle of it. Picture it, then, at the close of a long day, over a landscape still healing from a fire the season before. The blackened trunks stand against a sky going red and gold with the sunset, and between them, the first green has already risen, soft and new out of the ash, and low over that ground, catching the last of the light so that it seems to carry a piece of the sunset with it, comes the bird, unhurried, silent, its long feathers burning with the colors of the dying day. Crossing the renewed country, it has crossed for longer than anyone alive can remember. You would stand still and watch it pass. You would not run, and you would not hide, and you would not reach for a wall or a door. You would only watch, the way people have always watched the sun go down and come back, and feel the oldest and quietest comfort there is. That endings are not always endings, that out of the ash and the burned ground, something bright and whole comes back and rises and flies on into the gathering dark. That is the phoenix, if we let it be real, not a bird that cheats death, but a creature so long-lived and so bound to the fire that renews the world that, to the brief lives watching from below, it would seem to carry the sun itself across the sky, dying and being born in the one place we always mistook for its grave. Cross the ocean now, west, to a different sky and an older silence, the vast open country of North America, the great plains and the high mountains, and the endless forests of the Pacific coast, where the peoples who lived beneath that enormous sky watch the weather come from a long way off. On the open land, you can see a storm being born. You can watch the great towers of cloud build on the horizon in the afternoon heat, climbing miles into the air, going dark at the base until the whole western sky is a wall of blue-black, moving toward you with the thunder rolling ahead of it. And out of that watching, the peoples of this land imagined a being to match the storm. Not a serpent, not a beast of the ground, but a bird so vast that its wings were the thunder and its eyes were the lightning, the thunderbird. It appears across a great many of the native nations of North America, from the Pacific Northwest to the plains to the eastern woodlands, and though the details shift from people to people, the heart of it holds. It is enormous, a bird whose wingspan darkens the sky. The beating of its wings is the rolling thunder. The flash of its eyes, or the snapping of its beak, is the lightning. It carries the storm with it, or it is the storm, bringing the rains that the land needs, the water that fills the rivers and greens the plains and makes the world live. On the carved poles of the northwest coast, it spreads its wings above the other creatures. At the very top, the great power of the upper air. It was not simply feared, it was respected as one of the largest forces in the world, the master of the sky and the bringer of the season's rains, a being whose passage you could hear from over the horizon long before you saw it. And of all the creatures we have followed tonight, the thunderbird may be the one that stood closest to something real, because there truly were, not so very long ago in the memory of the land, birds of a size that could darken the sky. The largest flying birds that ever lived spread wings that stretched wider than a small plane, soaring giants that rode the wind on pinions longer than a person is tall. They are gone now, most of them, but they were real, and they flew over this very continent and the ones to the south, and the peoples who told of the thunderbird lived on land where the bones and the memory of enormous, soaring birds were part of the world. The thunderbird is not the sun given a face, nor fire given a body. It is, perhaps, the biggest thing that ever caught the wind, remembered and magnified, and married to the storm it was always seen against. So take it seriously and ask the question one more time. What would a real thunderbird be? A bird as large as a bird can be, bound not by magic, but by weather to the great storms of the open country. And here the answer lies in the storm itself, in the invisible architecture of moving air. Because a giant bird and a great storm are drawn to exactly the same thing. That thing is rising air. A soaring bird does not fly by flapping. A bird the size of the thunderbird could not possibly flap its way across the sky, any more than the dragon could. It flies by finding air that is going up, and riding it, spreading its wings and letting the rising column carry it higher and higher. For the cost of almost nothing, the great soaring birds live and die by these invisible elevators, the thermals that rise off sun-heated ground, the waves of air that lift over ridgelines, the updrafts along the fronts of weather systems, and a thunderstorm is the greatest engine of rising air in the entire natural world. The towering thunderhead is built by a column of warm, moist air roaring upward, miles high, faster and stronger than any thermal a sunny field could ever throw. Ahead of that storm, along its leading edge, the air is lifted in a great smooth surge as the storm shoulders its way forward. For a bird built to ride rising air, the front of an advancing thunderstorm would not be a danger to flee. It would be the richest source of lift in the sky, a moving wall of updraft that it could ride for hours, effortlessly, carried along at the head of the storm as the whole system marched across the land. The thunderbird would travel with the thunderheads, not because it commands them, but because they carry it, the way a surfer is carried on the front of a wave. It would appear when the storms appeared, right ahead of them across the plains, and vanish with them into the east as the weather passed. And to anyone watching from the ground, the great bird and the great storm would arrive together, move together, and leave together, until it became impossible to say where the bird ended and the storm began. And if you have drifted this far into the night with me, riding the front of the storm through this long, dark quiet, you might consider following along on the journeys we take each evening. There is no cost to it, only a small, quiet gesture that lets the next of these unfold in front of you when the light is low and the world has gone still. And now, back to the wall of moving air and the great bird riding the front of it. Give the thunderbird, then, the body such a life demands, wings enormously long and narrow, or long and broad, built for soaring and nothing else, spread to catch the smallest lift and hold it, a body light for its size, the hollow-boned architecture that every great flyer must have, and senses tuned to read the sky the way the werewolf read the forest floor, an eye that could see the building of a distant thunderhead from 50 miles off, that could read the darkening base and the spreading anvil top and know that lift was coming, and turn and begin the long soaring journey toward it across the open land, a creature that did not wait for the storm to reach it, but flew out to meet it and climbed the rising front and rode. How would such a bird feed? Not by carrying off the great prey of the legends, for even the largest flyer cannot lift much beyond its own weight. It would feed the way the giant soaring birds have always fed, ranging vast distances on the free lift of the wind, its eyes sweeping the ground far below for what the land offered, the animals that did not survive the plains' winter, the fish stranded in the shrinking summer pools, the carrion that a creature covering 100 miles a day on almost no energy could find where a walking hunter never would. The storm would serve it here too, for a great storm reshapes the land it crosses, swelling the rivers, driving the herds, leaving in its wake a countryside of stranded and drowned and driven creatures for a wide-ranging scavenger to glean. The thunderbird would follow the storm, not only for the lift, but for the harvest the storm left behind. And so consider what the sky would mean in a world where this bird was real. The peoples of the open country would watch the weather with a double attention, for the storm itself and for the great shape that rode ahead of it. The building of a thunderhead on the afternoon horizon would carry a second meaning, that somewhere on that advancing front, riding the lift, the great bird might be coming with the rain. And on the days when a storm marched in across the plains, the people would look up into the strange green dark light before the rain and search the leading edge of the cloud for the silhouette, the vast unhurried shape holding its place at the head of the weather, wings spread and motionless, carried forward on the surge of rising air with the thunder rolling beneath it. Picture it yourself, standing on the open land as the storm comes on. The air has gone still and heavy and cool, the way it does before the rain. The western sky is a wall of blue-black, and the first far thunder is rolling across the miles, and the light has turned to that strange bruised gold that only comes ahead of a great storm. And there, against the dark wall of the cloud, high on the leading edge, you see it, a shape too large to be any bird you know, wings spread wider than seems possible, holding perfectly still at the head of the storm, riding the rising front toward you without a single beat of those enormous wings. It is not coming for you, it is only riding the weather, as it has ridden the weather since long before anyone stood on this ground to watch. And the storm would break, and the rain would come sweeping across the plains, and the great bird would ride on ahead of it into the east and be gone, carried away on the same rising air that brought it, until the next dark tower built on the far horizon and called it out across the sky once more. That is the thunderbird, if we let it be real, not a god of the storm, but the largest thing that ever caught the wind, a soaring giant so perfectly married to the rising air of the great storms that it and the thunder would seem forever to be one and the same, arriving together out of the west and passing together into the dark. Come back to the water now, but not the deep black water where the kraken hangs in the cold. Come to the bright margins instead, the shallows, the reefs, the rocky coasts, where the sea meets the land and the light still reaches the bottom, where sailors have always hugged the shore, and where the oldest stories of the sea were born. Here lives a creature stranger than any monster, because it wears a face we recognize. Half of it belongs to the water, and half of it, unnervingly, belongs to us. The mermaid, the siren, the woman of the sea. She is very old. In the ancient Near East, there were deities half human and half fish, gods of the water who rose from the depths to bring wisdom to the shore. The Greeks told of the sirens, though their earliest sirens were bird women, singers whose song was so beautiful and so deadly that sailors who heard it steered their ships onto the rocks to reach them and drowned in the trying. And one hero had himself lashed to the mast so that he might hear the song and live, while his crew rode on with wax stopping their ears. Over the long centuries, the siren and the sea woman blurred together into the figure we know, beautiful above the waist and fish below, sitting on the rocks at the water's edge, combing her hair, singing to the passing ships, luring men down into the water with a longing they could not resist and did not survive. Every seafaring people along every coast eventually told some version of her. She was desire and drowning bound into one shape, the promise and the danger of the sea given a human face. And here the truth behind the legend is gentler and sadder than the story, and worth telling plainly. For much of history, the mermaids that sailors actually reported seeing were almost certainly real animals. The manatees and the dugongs, the great gentle sea cows that graze the shallow coastal waters of the warm seas. They are large, slow, air-breathing mammals, and they have a habit that no fish has. A mother will hold her calf against her body with a flipper as she nurses, rising to the surface, her rounded form and her upturned face breaking the water. To a tired sailor at a distance, half-starved for the sight of home, watching a large pale shape rise from the sea holding its young, the way a woman holds a child, the mind would do the rest. Even the great explorer who crossed the Western Ocean recorded seeing mermaids on his voyage and noted, a little disappointed, that they were not so beautiful as the paintings, because what he was looking at were manatees. The mermaid, in the end, was often loneliness and longing, looking at a sea cow and seeing a woman. But we are not here for the gentle truth alone. We are here for the question underneath the legend, and the mermaid's question is the most interesting of all, because it is not really about a fish-tailed woman. It is about intelligence in the water. What if there were a real creature of the shallow seas that was not gentle and slow, like the manatee, but sharp? A marine hunter, as clever as it was beautiful, a social, intelligent predator of the coast that used the one weapon the sirens were always said to wield. Not strength, but allure. What would that animal be? And how would it hunt? And how would we ever learn to share a coastline with a thing that was smart enough to lie to us? Begin with the fact that the sea already holds such minds. The ocean's most intelligent hunters are not fish at all, but mammals. The dolphins and their kin, warm-blooded, air-breathing, living in tight social groups, communicating in a rich stream of clicks and whistles, coordinating their hunts with a cleverness that rivals anything on land. They herd fish into tight balls and take turns feeding. They drive prey up onto mud banks and snatch it from the shallows. They pass techniques from mother to child, whole traditions of hunting that differ from one group to the next. There is nothing fantastical about a highly intelligent, social, warm-blooded predator of the coastal waters. It exists. The mermaid, made real, would simply be one built along different lines. Built, perhaps, for the shallows and the rocks rather than the open sea, and built around a different and more unsettling strategy. For the heart of the siren is not her tail, it is her song and her lure, the way she draws her prey to her, rather than chasing it down. And luring is a real and ancient strategy in the deep animal world. There are fish that dangle a living bait before their own jaws. There are hunters that mimic the call or the appearance of something harmless, something appealing, to draw the curious and the hungry within reach. An intelligent coastal predator that hunted by luring, that used sound, and perhaps the sight of itself, to bring prey to it, would be following one of the oldest hunting strategies there is, refined by a clever social mind into something genuinely dangerous. So build her, a marine mammal of the warm shallows, sleek and powerful, streamlined for the reefs and the rocky coves, rather than the open ocean. Give her the intelligence of the dolphin and more. A large brain built for a complex social life, for cooperation, for the patient reading of prey. Give her a voice, for sound travels far and clear underwater, and a coastal hunter that could produce a range of calls, could use them to coordinate with her pod, to confuse and herd fish, and perhaps This is where the legend sharpens into something cold, to draw in the curious, the seals, the sea lions, the diving birds, the large fish, all the creatures of the coast that turn toward an interesting sound, a hunter whose calls carried through the water and lifted at the surface into something that a listening ear might follow toward the rocks. Not a magic song that steals the will, simply a clever, curious-sounding call from a clever, patient hunter in a place where following an interesting sound has always been how the creatures of the coast find food and each other. Watch her pod hunt the shallows and see how the legend and the animal meet. They work the coast in a group, as dolphins do, spread along a reef or a rocky shore. They know the water intimately, every channel, every submerged ledge, every place where prey gathers and where it can be trapped. They call to one another and to the water at large, and the fish and the seals move in response, drawn or driven, herded toward the shallows and the coves where the pod waits. It is patient, coordinated, and quiet, a hunt run by minds that understand exactly what their prey will do. And to the sailors passing offshore, hearing those calls rise from the rocks where the surf broke white, seeing sleek pale shapes moving at the surface among the stones. The story would write itself. Voices from the rocks, beautiful shapes in the water, a pull toward the shore that ended for the ship that came too close to the reef, in the oldest way a ship can end, on the rocks, in the shallows, in the very water where the pod was waiting. And here is the uneasy heart of it. The reason the mermaid was always both loved and feared. A creature this intelligent could not be simply a monster to us. The way the kraken is a monster, it would be too much like us. It would look at us with a mind that recognized a mind. There would be a coexistence along the coasts, wary on both sides, two clever social species sharing the same edge of the same sea. And that is a far more unsettling thing than a beast in the dark, because a beast does not deceive you. A beast does not understand you well enough to lie. But a creature that hunts by luring is a creature that has learned to use the trust and the curiosity of others against them. And to share a coastline with such an intelligence would be to live beside something that knew you, watched you, and did not always mean you well. Picture it, then, at the end of a long day on a quiet coast. The sun is low over the water, and the light lies gold and pink across the surface of a calm sea, and the tide is coming in slow over the rocks. You are on the shore, and out among the stones where the reef breaks the surface, you hear it. A sound rising off the water, strange and clear and almost musical, carried in on the still evening air, and you see them, sleek pale shapes moving among the rocks in the last of the light, turning, calling to one another, watching the shore with an attention that is not the blank stare of a fish, but something older and sharper and aware. You would not go out to them. In that world, you would have learned better, the way the coastal peoples always learned better. You would stay on the warm sand above the tide line and watch them work the shallows in the fading light, beautiful and clever, and not for you, and let the calls rise and answer across the darkening water until the tide turned and the pod moved off along the coast and the sea went quiet and gold and empty once more. That is the mermaid, if we let her be real. Not a woman with a fish's tail, but the cleverest hunter of the shallow coasts, a mind as sharp as ours, moving in the water at the edge of the land, hunting by patience and allure, close enough to us to be recognized, and just far enough to never quite be trusted. Leave the warm coasts and the clever things in the water, and climb now up into the cold and the thin air, into the highest and emptiest country on earth, the great mountains, the Himalaya, where the peaks stand higher than anything else the world has raised, and the snow lies deep in the passes, and the wind comes off the ice with a cold that reaches the bone, and the old forests of the far northwest, the mountain rainforests, where the trees grow to enormous age, and the mist hangs in the valleys, and a person can walk all day and never leave the green shadow. In these places, the ones we have never truly settled, people have always spoken of something that shares the emptiness with them, something large, something that walks upright, on two legs, like a man, something that leaves a footprint in the snow and the mud, and then is gone. In the high Himalaya, they called it the Yeti, and the peoples of those mountains spoke of it not as a monster to be hunted, but as a fact of the high country, a large hair-covered being that lived above the villages, in the snow and the rock where the crops would not grow, and few had reason to go. In the mountains of the Pacific Northwest, the native peoples had their own names for it, the tall wild man of the forest, and later the settlers called it Sasquatch or Bigfoot, for the great tracks it was said to leave in the soft ground. Across a scatter of cold, remote mountainous places all around the world, the same figure appears, tall, upright, covered in hair, immensely strong, and above all shy. A thing glimpsed at a distance and then gone, known more by its tracks and its absence than by any clear sight of it. It does not attack the villages. It does not hunt people. It keeps to the high and the far, and it wants, as far as anyone can tell, only to be left alone. Of all the creatures we have followed tonight, this is the one that asks the least of us and unsettles the mind in the gentlest way. It breathes no fire, drowns no ships, poisons no ground. It simply might be there, in the emptiness we have not filled, and the whole force of it lies in that quiet possibility. And the question it asks is the softest question of the night. Not what would it do to us, but what if there were a large, intelligent creature that had simply chosen, across all its long history, to avoid us, a thing that shared the world with us, but wanted nothing from us, that met the whole loud advance of humanity by stepping quietly back into the deep cold places and staying there, unseen, uninterested, apart? Begin with the fact that this, of all the creatures tonight, is the least impossible. We know that there were other kinds of upright, intelligent, human-like beings not so very long ago. In the reckoning of the world, we shared this planet with several large-bodied kin who lived in the cold, who were stronger than us, who ranged across the mountains and the forests of the north. And there were great apes of enormous size, real ones, that walked the forests of Asia within the age of humankind. The idea of a large, hair-covered, upright primate surviving in the emptiest corners of the mountains is not a violation of anything we know about the living world. It is simply a cousin that stayed in the cold and the high places and never came down, and never, unlike us, decided to fill the whole earth with its noise. So build it, and build it for the cold and the emptiness. Give it size, for size is the friend of any warm-blooded thing in a cold place. A large body holds its heat far better than a small one, loses less of itself to the freezing air, and every creature of the deep cold, from the great bears to the mountain oxen, tends toward bigness for exactly this reason. Give it a heavy coat, dense and layered, the thick pelt of an animal that lives where the wind comes off the ice, colored the gray-brown of rock and winter brush and old snow, so that a still thing at a distance is simply part of the mountainside. Give it the broad, strong body of a climber and a walker, built for the vertical world of the high country the way the griffin was, for hauling itself up the broken rock and moving tirelessly across the steep ground where nothing on wheels can follow and few things on two legs would want to. And give it, above all, the mind. For the thing every legend agrees upon is that it is clever enough to stay hidden. And staying hidden from humanity is one of the hardest and most demanding forms of intelligence there is. Because that is the true marvel of this creature, if it were real, not its strength, not its size, but its avoidance. Consider how much intelligence it would take to live in the same mountains as people and be seen only in glimpses, to read the movement of humans across the land and always be somewhere else, to move at the times. We do not move. Through the country we do not go, leaving nothing but the occasional track in the snow for the wind to fill, to have watched, over uncounted generations, the slow spread of the loud, restless, world-filling species down in the valleys, and to have made, as a whole kind, the long quiet decision to stay away from it. That is not stupidity hiding in the hills. That is a deep and patient wariness, a wisdom of avoidance, an intelligence bent entirely toward the single goal of never being fully known. Watch it live, then, in the high country, and see how little it would need from the world we made. It would range across the empty ground above the villages and beyond the last trees, feeding on what the mountains offer to something willing to work for it. The roots and the hardy plants, the small animals, the leavings of the high pastures, the food that a large, clever omnivore can find where a narrow specialist would starve. It would shelter in the caves and the rock hollows and the dense timber, out of the wind, keeping the warmth of its great body through the long freezing nights. It would move mostly in the low light, the dawn and the dusk and the dark, when the human world is quiet, and the high country belongs to the things that were there before us, and it would keep, always to the margins, the ground too high, too cold, too steep, too far to be worth our while, the empty spaces on the map that we fly over and drive around and almost never enter. In all the crowded world, there is still a great deal of that emptiness left, more than enough for something that wanted only to be left alone in it. And consider what a strange comfort that would be in a world where it was real. Every other creature tonight took something from us, surrendered ground, forbidden water, a coast we could not trust. This one would take nothing. It would simply be there, up in the cold and the high and the far, sharing the planet with us across a gap that it, not we, insisted upon keeping. To know that it was there would be, to know that the world was not entirely ours after all, that in the highest and emptiest places, above the last village and beyond the last road, something large and old and wise still moved through the snow and the rock, wanting nothing from all our noise, watching the lights of our world from a great cold distance, and turning, always, back into the dark. There is a strange peace in that, the peace of a wildness that has not been conquered, a corner of the earth that still belongs to something other than us, and asks only that we leave it be. Picture it, then, at the very edge of the day, high in the mountains. You have climbed all afternoon, and the light is going, and the great peaks around you have turned the deep rose and violet that only high snow takes at dusk. And the cold is coming down hard with the dark, and across the valley, on a slope of broken rock and old snow, something moves, a shape, upright, dark against the gray and white, too large and too deliberate to be anything you can easily name. It is not coming toward you. It has already seen you. It saw you most likely a long time ago. And it is doing the thing it has always done, which is to move away, unhurried, up the slope and toward the high rocks, back into the emptiness where it lives. It pauses once, a dark, upright shape at the edge of the failing light, and it seems for a moment to look back, and then it is gone, over the shoulder of the mountain, into the cold and the dark and the vast high silence, and you are alone again on the darkening slope, with the wind and the snow and the last of the light, and the quiet certainty that the world is larger and stranger and emptier than the valleys below will ever believe. That is the Yeti, if we let it be real, not a monster of the snow, but a wise and shy cousin of ours who made the opposite choice, who met the whole loud rise of humankind and stepped back into the high cold places and stayed there, apart and unhurried and free, wanting nothing from us but the distance it has always kept. Come down now, one last time, from the high cold mountains, down and further down into the dark under the ground, into the mouths of caves, the old mine shafts, the deep places where the daylight gives out a few steps in, and the cold breath of the earth comes up to meet you. Every people that ever lived near such a place has felt the same thing standing at its edge, that the dark below is not empty, that something waits at the threshold between the world of the living and whatever lies beneath. And to guard that threshold, the ancient world set a dog, not a small one, a great black hound with more heads than a dog should have, standing at the gate of the underworld, letting the dead pass in and letting no one back out. Cerberus, the hound of hell. The Greeks knew him best. Cerberus was the watchdog of the underworld, the guardian of the gate through which the souls of the dead entered the realm below. And his task was simple and absolute. None who entered were to leave. He was monstrous. 3 heads, the old poets said, sometimes more, a mane of living serpents, a serpent's tail, a bark that came from 3 throats at once, and rolled up out of the dark like thunder underground. He was strong enough that only the greatest of heroes could overcome him, and even then, not by killing, but by mastering, dragging him up into the daylight by main force, as the last and hardest of a lifetime's labors. But the guardian dog of the dark places is older and wider than Greece, all across Europe. Along the lonely roads, and at the crossroads, and in the churchyards, people told of the black dog, a great spectral hound with burning eyes that appeared on the dark paths at night, an omen, a guardian, a thing you did not want to meet, that watched the lonely places between one safe light and the next. Of all our creatures, this is the one most bound to a single idea, the guardian of the threshold, the keeper of the dark doorway, the thing that stands at the border between the safe world and the one below. And the question it asks is a quiet and a primal one. Set aside the underworld and the souls of the dead, what if there were a real animal that ruled the dark places under the ground, a great hunter of the caves and the deep hollows, a creature so perfectly built for the lightless world that to cross into its territory was, in the plainest sense, to walk into the jaws of something that could see you when you could not see it at all. What would that guardian be? And how would it hunt in the dark? And why would every people that ever stood at the mouth of a cave have felt a dog waiting in it? Begin with the dog itself, because the dog is not a random choice, and understanding why it is a dog is the key to the whole thing. Of all the animals humankind has ever known, none reads the invisible world as the dog does. A dog does not need light. A dog lives in a universe of scent and sound, so rich and so detailed that our own bright, seeing world is thin and poor beside it. It knows what passed this way hours ago. It knows what is around the corner, in the next room, behind the closed door, in the dark it cannot see into, because it does not need to see, and it hears what we cannot. The small sounds, the far sounds, the tread of a foot on soft ground from across a field. A creature built on the dog's plan is a creature that owns the dark, that suffers no disadvantage at all when the light goes out, because it was never using the light to begin with. If you were going to build a guardian for the lightless world under the ground, you could not do better than to build it as a hound. So, build it, a great canid, larger and heavier than any wolf, powerful through the chest and the jaws, built not for the long chase across open country, but for the short, overwhelming rush in a confined space, for cornering and holding and crushing in the tight dark of a cave passage where there is nowhere to run. Give it the coat of a thing that lives in the cold and the damp of the underground, dark as the rock, so that even in what little light reaches the cave mouth, it is only a deeper piece of the shadow. Give it eyes with the great mirror behind them that gathers every last crumb of light, so that in the faint gray of the threshold, where a human is already half blind, it sees clearly. And give it, for the total dark beyond, the senses that need no light at all, the nose that maps the passage, and everything that has moved through it, the ears that hear the scrape, and the breath and the heartbeat of anything that comes into its dark, and the many heads of the legend. Set aside the impossible anatomy and keep what the image was reaching for. A guardian that cannot be slipped past, that watches every direction at once, that has no blind side, no angle of approach that is safe, no moment when it is not aware. A creature of the dark doorway, so completely alert that to the things it hunted, it might as well have had a head for every direction they could come from. Watch it hunt the dark and see how hopeless that hunt would be for anything on the wrong end of it. It lives in the deep places, the cave systems, the underground hollows, the lightless warrens, where the temperature never changes and the dark is total and absolute. A dark that no eye, however good, can pierce, because there is simply nothing there to see by. And in that dark, it does not hunt by sight at all. It waits at the places where prey must pass, the narrow throat of a passage, the ledge above an underground pool where the cave creatures come, the threshold where the outside world's animals wander in seeking shelter. It knows they are coming long before they arrive. It smells them, hears them, tracks their fumbling blind progress through a world it navigates with perfect ease. And when they come within reach, the rush comes out of a darkness they cannot see into, a sudden overwhelming violence from a direction they never had a chance to guard, and it is over before they understand that they were never alone, that something had been waiting in the black the whole time, watching them with senses that did not need the light they had lost. And here is why every people that ever stood at a cave mouth felt the guardian waiting, because in a way, they were right. The mouth of a cave, the entrance to the deep dark, is a genuine threshold, a real border between the world we are built for and a world we are not. Our eyes fail there. Our confidence fails there. We are, the moment we step past the light, transformed from the masters of the world into blind, fumbling, vulnerable things, stripped of the one sense we most rely on, entering the home ground of whatever lives in the dark on its own terms. The dread we feel at the edge of the underground is not superstition. It is an honest animal recognition that we are about to give up our greatest advantage and walk half-blind into someone else's country. The hellhound is that dread given a shape. It is the truth of the dark doorway made into a body. The knowledge that beyond the threshold, in the deep places, we are not the hunters anymore. And so consider the world with such a guardian in it. It would not cost us the mountains or the sea lanes. It would cost us the underground, the deep caves, the old workings, the lightless hollows that we have never truly wanted anyway. There would be cave mouths that the local people did not enter and could tell you why in a low voice, and did not need to be told twice. There would be a knowledge of which dark doorways in the hills were only dark, and which ones were occupied, which thresholds had a keeper. And there would be, at the edge of every deep cave, the same feeling there has always been, only now with a plain and living reason behind it. The sense of a breath coming up out of the dark. That was not only the cold air of the earth, the sense of being watched from a blackness you could not watch back into, the old certainty that you had come to the edge of a place that belonged to something else, and that the wise thing, the only thing, was to stay in the light. Picture it, then, at the mouth of such a cave as the last light of the day drains out of the sky. The entrance is a low, dark arch in the hillside, and the cold breath of the earth comes out of it steady and even, and the daylight reaches only a few steps in before the dark takes over completely. And from somewhere back in that dark, past where your eyes give out, you hear it. Not a growl, not yet, but a sound of something large shifting its weight on the stone, the scrape of a great body settling, and then, low and rolling and impossibly deep, a breath, the slow breath of something that has been aware of you since long before you reached the threshold. 2 points of faint light catch the last of the day, far back in the black, low to the ground, and steady and fixed on you. You would not go in. In that world, no one would go in. You would step back from the cold breath of the doorway, back into the last of the light, and leave the dark place to its keeper, and go home to the fire and the walls and the bright rooms of the living world above. And be glad, deeply and wordlessly glad, that the border held, and that whatever waited in the dark was content, this night, to let you walk away from the threshold and back into the light. That is the hellhound. If we let it be real, not a demon at the gate of the dead, but the perfect hunter of the lightless world, a guardian so wholly at home in the dark that it made the dark its own and gave a living shape to the oldest and truest fear we have, that beyond the reach of the light, at the threshold of the deep places, we were never the ones in charge. Come back up into the light one last time, out of the dark under the ground, up through the cave mouth, out into the green world in the low gold of a late afternoon, and come to the quietest of all the forests, not the deep dark woods of the wolf, but a gentler wood, dappled and still, where the light falls in slow columns through the high leaves, and the only sound is water moving somewhere over stones. Here, at the very end of our long night, lives the gentlest creature of them all, the one the whole world imagined not out of fear, but out of longing, the one that could never be caught, the unicorn. She comes to us mostly from the medieval world, from the bestiaries and the tapestries, though her roots run back further, to old travelers' tales of a single-horned beast in far countries. The medieval imagination made her a creature of pure paradox, fierce and untamable, swift beyond any hunter, impossible to take by force, and yet gentle past all telling, drawn to innocence, so wild that no net could hold her, and so tender that she would lay her head down and grow still in the presence of something pure, a white deer or a white horse, or a small white goat-like thing, depending on who told it, with a single spiraling horn rising from her brow, a horn that was said to purify water, to heal the sick, to be worth more than its weight in gold. She was solitary, she was elusive, she was, above all, untouchable. The one wild thing that could not be owned, that lived at the edge of the world and the edge of belief, glimpsed and never held. The horn was real, in its way, and the truth of it is one of the quiet marvels of history. For centuries, the powerful and the wealthy paid fortunes for the true horn of the unicorn. Long, pale, spiraling, said to detect poison and to cure any ill. And those horns were real objects, held in treasuries, set in gold. They were the long spiraled tusks of the narwhal, the small whale of the cold northern seas, whose single twisting tooth grows out through its lip in a perfect spiral. Traders, who knew exactly what they were selling, carried them south from the icy waters and sold them as the horn of the unicorn, and no one who bought them ever knew that the most magical object in the medieval world came not from a white beast in a forest glade, but from a whale in the freezing dark of the northern ocean. The unicorn's horn was real. It simply belonged to another animal, in another world, at the far cold top of the map. But we have followed the longing tonight. Not only the fact, and the unicorn's longing is the deepest of all, because she is not really about a horse with a horn. She is about the thing that stays wild, the one creature that will not be caught, will not be tamed, will not be brought in from the edge of the world and put to use in an age when humankind was bending every animal to its will, the horse to the plow, the ox to the yoke, the dog to the hunt, the whole living world harnessed and fenced and owned. The unicorn was the dream of the one thing that stayed free. And so we ask, gently, our last question of the night. What if there were a real creature like that, not fierce, not fanged, not a hunter of anything, but so shy, so swift, so perfectly attuned to solitude that it simply could never be held? What would it be, and why would we have needed so badly to believe in it? Build her then softly, for she is the easiest of all, a forest ungulate, a deer-like thing of the deep, quiet woods, pale-coated, slender, built for speed and for stillness and for vanishing. Give her the single horn if you like. Though she needs no weapon, a horn can be a thing of display, of rivalry, of no more menace than the antlers of a stag. Give her senses tuned entirely to one purpose, the detection of anything that might mean her harm, and the swift, silent flight from it before it ever knew she was there. She would not fight. She would not need to. She would live at the far edge of the wild, in the deepest and least visited woods, and her whole art would be the art of not being found, The art of the glimpse, the white shape half seen between the trees, gone before the eye could fix on it, leaving only the swaying of a branch and the doubt of whether anything had been there at all. The one creature that gave us nothing to fear and nothing to hold, only the knowing that she was out there, somewhere, still free. And so we come to the end of our long journey through the dark, and it is worth pausing here in the quiet green of the last wood to look back at all of them together. Think of the road we have walked tonight, the great cold king of the peaks, folded into the empty mountains, the lion eagle guarding the high stone, the silent leviathan hanging in the dark of the deep, the little crowned killer in the dry ruins, and the pack that wakes with the silver moon, and the fire hunter on the burning ground, the bird that carried the sun across the sky, and the giant riding the front of the storm, and the clever pale shapes calling from the shallows, the shy wise cousin in the high snow, and the keeper of the dark doorway. And now, at the last, the white shape that could never be caught. Look at what they all have in common. Every one of them lived in a place we had not filled. The empty mountains, the deep sea, the burning ground, the high snow, the dark under the earth, the far edge of the deepest wood. They were the world's way of saying, this part is not yours, and perhaps that is why we made them, all of them, across every age and every people, not because we truly believed a serpent held the sky together, or a bird was born from ash, but because we needed the map to still have edges. We needed to believe that somewhere out past the last light of the last village, the world went on being wild and strange and larger than us, that there were still doors we had not opened, that the dark still held something we had not named, and now the light is going in the quiet wood, and it is time to let them go. Let the dragon fold its wings on the high cold ledge and sleep on its bed of centuries. Let the kraken settle back into the black, where it has never seen the sun. Let the wolves lie down through the dark of the moon. Let the firebird cross one last sunset and be gone. Let the great shape ride its storm away into the east. Let the keeper of the dark doorway close its eyes at the edge of the deep. Let the wise one step back over the shoulder of the mountain into the high silence, and let the white shape in the wood turn once and look back at us with no fear at all, and then slip away between the trees. Gone. The forest is quiet now. The light is nearly down, and you can feel, can't you, how gentle the world becomes when we let the wild things keep their corner of it, when we stop trying to catch them, when we simply let them be out there, in the dark, in the deep, in the high and the far and the untouched places. Real or not, it hardly matters now, keeping the edges of the map for us so that the world stays large. Rest here a while, in the last of the green light. There is nothing to catch tonight, nothing to fear, only the wood going slowly dark, only the water over the stones, only the wild things out there keeping the edges safe and free, and so are you. Good night.